Great. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of our career conversations. We're very excited today to be joined by Dr. James Wade, who was a Beckman Scholar back at Furman University when he was starting his academic career. James, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to hear about how you got into science and where that career path has taken you. So, for all of these, I do like to start kind of back at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about those first times when you thought, you know what, I really love science. This is something that I'm interested in pursuing as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to be here. I think for me, there's little glimpses of excitement about science that I could go back maybe in the middle school or before era, but really, I remember it happening in earnest in a sophomore level chemistry class in high school. And like many people, it was really inspired by a teacher that was amazing, Miss Dunn. She, funny enough, ended up becoming our disciplinarian after she was my chemistry teacher. But I found myself frequently going back to the disciplinarian's office to go talk to her because of the excitement that she inspired. It's not even so much the content of the class that I particularly enjoyed, but chemistry did end up sticking. It was more just the enthusiasm and curiosity that she brought into the classroom, and that has been really infectious throughout the rest of my career. It was also the first time that I ended up sitting next to my now wife in that class, and we learned that we were terrible lab partners. We tried it again in undergrad, but we learned that that was not a good route for us to go down.
Just adds to the excitement of the class, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great. So when you went to Furman, did you think chemistry's for me, or were you still broadly looking at other options?
I was I had a bias towards chemistry. I think it's because it's the course that I had the most fun on in high school, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do other than I knew I wanted to go into science, and I didn't want to go into medicine. At least I didn't want to be pre-med. So the Furman had just opened a brand new science building when I was an incoming freshman. That was in 2008. So not great things happened during that first year with the financial crisis and all that. But the brand new building was there. And I knew that I wanted to go and make use of it. The facilities were amazing. The resources were pretty unusual for an undergraduate institution. I don't know if this has continued now, but it still has a robust undergraduate program. At that time, it had one of the largest undergraduate summer programs that really gave me some access to get started with, I'll say, I would have called it independent at the time, but maybe quasi-independent would be more appropriate there, to really get my hands dirty in a lab and see what it was like to do research as close to for real as a 18 or 19-year-old really could have done at the time. So freshman year I was doing chemistry research, and I knew I didn't want to turn back as soon as I got to get into the lab.
And so were you a Beckman Scholar at that point, or was that a little later?
It was the same research, so I ended up staying in the same lab. So this was the Wheeler lab. John and Sandy Wheeler were both professors in this lab, and we worked very closely with Dr. Kane McGuire. KM is what we called him. So I was an analytical chemist at analytical chemistry lab. I didn't know that I was going to be passionate about analytical chemistry at the time, but that's what I ended up working on there. And I was ended up being funded through the Beckman Scholars Program, I believe during my junior year was when that happened. So I did it all 4 years. I didn't start until the second semester of my freshman year, but all 4 years I got to research there, and got to have a lot of continuity for that. That seems to be unusual in my experience of mentoring undergraduates and graduate students as they bounce around a lot. But I got to be more or less in the same lab for 3.5 or almost 4 years.
Yeah, that does sound very unusual. And you
Yeah.
were very seasoned when you got the Beckman Scholar Award. Already
Yeah.
done that much research. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So did that then catapult you into graduate school? What were you thinking about as you were sort of making that?
I I ended up, I said that I didn't start out wanting to do pre-med at all, but throughout the course of the research itself was looking at characterizing these transition metal complexes. They were chromium based, and the intention was for them to interact with DNA, and they would intercalate into DNA, and then you'd be able to use light to selectively damage cancerous cells. Through that research, I became more interested in the bioanalytical field, or just medical applications of research in general. So when I was looking to move, like I knew I wanted to go to some sort of continuing education, be it graduate school, medical school. I looked heavily into MD, PhD programs. In fact, I bought all of the MCAT preparation materials to get ready to go and start applying for those. I was looking at some of the top programs to do that, and ultimately decided against it. I decided to go get my PhD instead, mostly because I got good, what I would call good advice from my mentors at the time. So the Wheelers, both John and Sandy, were really great at guiding me towards making a decision rather than just doing both degrees as part of this. And
Mhm.
I also realized that I had the scientific discovery aspects. Of course, you can make lots of scientific discoveries as an MD, PhD, but the PhD aspect really drew me. I was more drawn to that. Because I just got the tinkering aspects of the PhD is what kind of pushed me towards that in the end.
And so was there someone at Michigan that you were particularly excited to work with?
Mm. So I ended up the when picking graduate schools, I knew that mostly I wanted to do analytical chemistry, and analytical chemistry is very popular in the Midwest. And we joke that it's because it's boring there and there's nothing to do except for go measure things very carefully. I live in the Midwest now, and I actually
Oh.
love living here. But the so I knew I wanted to do that, and so Michigan, Illinois, were both top programs at the time. I ended up going to Illinois for my graduate work because I was very inspired by the guy who hosted the graduate students during the visit, Ryan Bailey. That's who my PI for grad school ended up being. But I ended up back at Michigan regardless, because he ended up moving during the ends of my graduate school, taking from Illinois to Michigan. So I
Wow.
was very interested in his research. It was outside the realm of what was traditional in analytical chemistry, so silicon photonic biosensors. But in general, I loved the capabilities at again the Big Ten, which I hadn't thought about much before my graduate school visits. It seems to be a powerhouse in the measurement science disciplines overall, and so that's kind of what drew me there. It also helped, I should say, bring my wife back into this. So she's a veterinarian, and
Okay.
the cross section of competitive PhD chemistry programs and vet schools is not all that high. But also happen to have in the Midwest. So like Wisconsin has this, Illinois has this. So that helped narrow the decisions as well. But we actually made our decisions mostly independently, where I was really, really excited to start off at Illinois.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Well,
I thought
I
you
ended
ended
up
up
at
at
both.
Michigan. Yeah, I didn't know that
Yes. Yeah.
couple steps. And then you had to move with your advisor through
Yep.
that
And
process as well. And yeah.
I begrudgingly grew to love Ann Arbor. I spent about a year and a half there, and I ended up moving about an hour and a half drives north to Midland, Michigan, which is where I still am today. So funny enough, the chemistry building at Michigan is named Dow. I guess not too surprisingly, given the influence that Dow, the company, which is where I work now, has had over chemistry and universities as part of that.
Mhm. So when did you make a transition? You did your graduate work and then did you
Mm-hmm.
go into a postdoctoral position?
I I did a little bit of a postdoc to basically make sure the lab was off to a good start when it moved from Illinois to Michigan. So I stayed in the same lab, but did transition into becoming a postdoc. And kind of like the my undergraduate, I ended up making somewhat of a shift towards the end. I was hell bent on becoming an academic up until actually even defending my PhD. I was very excited about that prospect. I wanted to continue in something in the biosensors realm, most likely. I was interviewing for postdocs while I was also interviewing for industry jobs. Actually, I shouldn't, not plural. I interviewed for one industry job, which is the one that I ended up taking. And I got connected to Dow because my lab was collaborating with them. So I was part of a university partnership that they had funded, but I really had dismissed the prospect of going into industry right until I went to interview. Again, for me, the academic life was something that I thought was I wanted to do. And during my interview process itself, I was so impressed by the scientists that I got to interact with that it totally changed my perspective on what industrial research could be. I thought that, we make a lot of plastics. So I thought polyethylene, what a boring molecule or boring polymer to study. Why would I want to spend my career doing that? And I can tell you, I'm almost 8 years at Dow, and we're never bored. It really is. The scientific challenges we face are very different than what I would have faced had I gone into academia. There's not much bio in that, but it's still very fulfilling and exciting. And I look forward to coming to work to continue to explore those material science disciplines rather than biological sciences.
But you were also actively pursuing postdoc positions. Was
Mhm.
your mentor really supportive of you, evaluating these different options, or did that help at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan, I mean, we went through a lot together, moving labs for any current graduate students. I would caution against doing that if at all possible, but often it's not your choice. But through that big change, he actually was a fantastic mentor for me. I actually had a bit of a fear, to be honest, when I was leaning towards industry because I thought that that was almost like the failure route.
Hmm.
I mean, I should disabuse any graduate students of that notion. You should choose what you want to do because that's what you want to do, not because people are expecting you to do so. And I got the actual exact opposite from my advisor. Ryan was, very supportive through the whole process and helped me. I specifically remember one day in particular, he took me out to lunch just to hear what I had to say. He listened a lot. He coached me, and um, actually, he really helped me feel good about making the proactive decision to go into industry because of what I described and the excitement that I had that I was reluctant to really accept. And I'm so glad that I had that support. There's still parts of me that wonders what happens if I would have gone into an academic direction, right? There's something about having your own lab that sounds, really appealing, but I'm very happy with the decision I made.
That's amazing. So can you just talk a little bit about, now that you're in industry, how does it compare and differ from what you experienced in an academic lab?
Yeah, one of the first lessons I learned when I started at Dow was I didn't have to do everything myself. As a graduate student, I was encouraged to own as much of the process as I could. I wanted to become an expert in any of the technologies that I was interfacing with. I wanted to dive deep. You could ask me any question about whatever I would see, and I would be expected to know the answer. In industry, it's a lot more results oriented in the sense that you don't need to worry about you doing things independently. In fact, it's the opposite. You want to leverage the experts that you have around you. In particular, I remember I was setting up the details aren't too important, but setting up a high temperature configuration and I needed to do some custom electronics and I was, ready to go get out the solder and do some of the stuff myself. And my mentor pulled me aside and said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Let's go to the basement. Let's go talk to the world expert at creating these
Yeah,
custom robotics configurations to help you." And that's who we went and talked to. And I remember that to this day. And you have to kind of beat it out of the graduate students. And they come in like, no, it's not that it wasn't collaborative in grad school because it was, but it's even more so here where it's almost you're doing something wrong if you can't find somebody else to come and help you along the way.
that's interesting. So is there anything you would have done in grad school to help kind of prepare you for that? If you, let's say, go back to grad school and think you were sort of more focused on an industry position from the get-go.
Yeah. So at Illinois, they have something called the MRL, Materials Research Lab, I think is what it stood for. Well, we just called it the acronym, the MRL. And that was staffed with, it was user facilities that had equipment that you would use, like you'd have, electron microscopes or sputter coats or all sorts of equipment that most labs would not want to keep their own of. Most universities have these. And what I would have done a lot more of is actually befriend those staff scientists because that's the sort of persona that you'll end up working with maybe more in industry than you would in academia and learn how to collaborate with people who are excited to tell you about what they do and are excited to work with you to solve your problem, even if it isn't the problem that they're the most passionate about. There's user facilities or just shared resources at most major PhD programs. And so I wish I would have done more of that. I just gone and hung around there to learn from their experience. It's not, it's, I guess, just from looking at some of the trade journals, it seems a little less common than it used to be to staff those facilities with PhD scientists, but that's all it was for the most part at Illinois. So they've been through what you've been through, so they can also help coaches as well, even aside from contributing to their project, they can maybe be a friendly ear.
A little co-mentorship.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and kind of walking through your journey. Is there any last little nugget of advice you would like to throw out there for people, especially, considering how to navigate their next step?
Yeah. I was talking with an undergraduate student today at the University of Michigan that I've been mentoring for a little while, and he is filling out his graduate school applications right now. And so I gave him some advice that I think might be worthwhile is remember when you go on your visits that you don't have to impress people when you're there. They've already reviewed your application. They already know that you're smart. Go on those visits to learn, explore, and really just understand what you're likely to go get into. Again, you don't need to impress people. Even this is also true when you get to grad school, right? Don't worry about impressing people. That curiosity and exploration is likely what's driving you towards a career in science to begin with. And so just continue to leverage that and surround yourself and flock to people that have that curiosity mindset as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that and for sharing that. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you again.